Coming up with This Week in Computer Hardware, Intel Speed Shift tested, and guess what, kids? It really works. Dell 799 gaming laptop, 2 new GPUs coming from AMD, Synology's got a router, Mini-ITX builds, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 342, recorded November 19th, 2015. Speed Shift works. It really does.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with free step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to iFixit.com/twit and enter the code TWiCH at checkout. And by Whole Home. Whole Home is more than just a smart thermostat. Together with your smartphone and a smart plug, you can monitor anything you can plug in. For an exclusive 30% limited time discount, visit wholehome.com/twit. And by Wealthfront. Wealthfront is a low-cost, automated investment service that is the most sophisticated way for you to invest your money. Whether you've got millions or you're just starting out, visit wealthfront.com/twitch to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. That's wealthfront.com/twitch.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, most frustrating news in computer hardware, software, mobile devices, watches, and potentially in the future, cars.
Is it really the news that is frustrating, or is it like everything about getting to the process of recording about the news?
I think it's everything that gets us to the process of recording about the news.
Okay. That seems fair.
And normally we don't talk a lot about software, but in this week it was one of those Windows 10, which is my friend, my compatriot, my ally in the creation of tech thing and Twitch. And for reasons I don't understand, as part of the last Windows upgrade, something called Skype Video was installed on my machine, which sounds fantastic. Except that it accepts inbound calls, does not warn you of them, won't call out, and won't connect, which is problematic for a tool that is essentially about video communications. So hopefully, now that we've removed that app, installed the Skype desktop, reinstalled twice, everything will continue to run, including my audio.
What is that app supposed to do?
And technically, it allows us to communicate just as we are now, video communications with a audio feed in near real time, given the latency on the internet. But when it won't actually let you connect to anything, it is not an effective communications tool. If you're not picking up on the snark at this point, it's because you're very generous and probably more kind-hearted than I or Ryan or I are right now. Ryan, who's been waiting patiently, we just slowly started to rebuild a machine. And you may be wondering what that has to do with hardware, but ladies and gentlemen, each and every day you may find yourself facing new and exciting difficulties that may have something to do with something as simple as a driver update or a change. So remember, if all else fails, tear it all apart and build it back up again, because you may have no other option. Look for the older driver. Download the previous version of the software. If you're really smart, you keep those things stored at all times. You have to be super organized to keep like all of the old versions of your hardware drivers.
Right.
But, oh my goodness. So a lot of stuff going on today. The thing I thought was kind of the most curious one was you got pretty hands-on with Intel's Speed Shift.
Yeah.
How did you decide to actually test that?
Well, so here's the thing. We're talking about, new versions of Windows coming out and changing things. This kind of story was basically started with that new version of Windows. Version 10.586, I believe, is the new version of Windows 10 that was just released. And if you remember back to when Skylake was first announced at IDF, Intel talked about a technology and a feature called Speed Shift, which is basically takes the capability of the processor to change P states, to change its clock speed based on the workload, and it takes some of the control away from the operating system and puts it on the processor hardware itself. That in and of its, by itself maybe doesn't sound very interesting or very useful.
But you'd be wrong.
You would be wrong, as it turns out, right? So, I mean, the idea is pretty simple, right? So you started at a low clock speed because you want to run at low power and high efficiency. And as the work increases that the operating system or the application is asking the processor to do, the processor kind of jumps up in speed up until it either meets some threshold where it's getting the performance done in the time it's supposed to, and or when it reaches its maximum, whether it be for thermal throttling or its physical clock speed limits or whatever it happens to be. The problem is with Windows, that process would take some time. It would send some work to the processor, judge how the performance is going, and then say, okay, let's adjust performance again, wait and see how the performance is going, and then maybe tell it to adjust one more time. And that could take, depending on the platform and the workload, anywhere from 60 to 100 milliseconds or something like that for it to go from its full idle to its full clock speed. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, right? You're talking about a tenth of a second. Yeah.
Those tenths of a second add up, though.
It does,
one by
right?
one.
So the idea of speed shift is that the processor itself now is able to say, hey, I know what my workload is. And I think this is going to be a task that we can get done quickly, but is also important. So we're going to jack up the speed very quickly. And it's able to do that with speed shift. And it can do it in our testing 10 times faster. It can jump from its idle speed to its maximum clock speed 10 times faster than before speed shift was actually enabled in the operating system. So if you look down at the next graph here, this is a custom application. It was actually coded by Intel. We compiled it that simulates a workload and then measures clock speed accordingly. And if you scroll down one more to the next graph, it kind of zooms in on the interesting part where the green line represents the previous version of Windows, and the blue line represents the new version, the 10.586. And you can see there what we're measuring is clock speed over time. And on the left-hand side, the green line starts out at about 800 megahertz, and it takes until about 30 milliseconds to jump up to about 2 gigahertz, and it takes 60 plus milliseconds to jump up to the full 3 gigahertz. The blue line, however, represents the same exact hardware with the new version of Windows and speed shift enabled, where that happens in about 6 milliseconds. So you're getting from 60 down to 6 milliseconds of time. And that's a pretty drastic improvement, right? And if you scroll to the next graph, it shows the same thing on Lenovo Yoga 900, same kind of hardware though.
There's part of me that wants to snark and be like, and at the end of the year, you saved yourself several seconds and perhaps even minutes. But the reality is, in terms of, perception, it's actually really cool because a lot of little things add up to make, to give you the idea that your computer is not particularly fast or could be faster. And that's a huge reduction.
If you remember back to like when we were talking about SSDs, right? SSDs being like, hey, if you put an SSD in your computer, it's going to feel this much faster. It's the same idea, right? Your system wasn't necessarily doing things like opening web browsers, or opening up new web pages in browsers particularly faster, but the snappiness of everything made it feel like a whole new computer. This is a similar idea, a much less dramatic impact, but still a similar style of impact. The idea, like the kind of implementation model for this is touchscreen devices in particular, right? So if you've got, like I've got this Surface Book here, right? The idea is that when you touch the screen, you want it to respond immediately. And if you have a web page open like PCPro.com or TheVerge.com, something that has a lot of stuff on it, maybe it has Flash on it, maybe it has a lot of overlays on it. When you want to scroll up that page, you want it to respond immediately. And it can do that better when it's running at a higher clock speed. And that's been one of Intel's kind of goals, talking to the performance team for over the last several years. It's like, look, we know that in the mobile space, if you look at iPads and iPhones, that the user experience has been very different, right? When you use an iPad, it's not a wildly faster product than some of the Android tablets, but it just feels more responsive. And because of that, you get a better impression of it. So they're trying to do the same thing in Android. Now they're trying to do the same thing in Windows. If you look down at the article, if you skip, like we looked at a couple of standard benchmarks, they show some improvements, but that's not really that interesting. It does show you that like some tasks will be completed faster because you get up to that clock speed. But in reality, you're really only talking about, that 50 to 60 millisecond time difference, right? Because you're still getting the same clock speed eventually. It's just how fast it gets there.
It's the touch latency on the Surface Book where it really starts to look interesting because it's funny. with one of the things that's really interesting. For example, Steam operating system kind of really picks up, and the Steam boxes start hitting it. Ars Technica kind of published something we all knew was coming, which is like, Steam boxes aren't as fast as Windows machines, and a big part of that is there's been so much engineering prowess and resources thrown at figuring out what makes an operating system feel faster, and then dumping that on top of Windows. And this is something where 158.1 in milliseconds and 91.5, boy, milliseconds. That's not a lot of time, but in something that is as tactile as dealing with your response, finger motion to actual pigment, pixel movement, click to clunk, that's a huge difference. That's a 72% improvement. That is that's going to make the whole machine feel like it's faster.
Right. And actually, I did a video of this to kind of go with the story. And in that video, you'll see some clips of, what we used to test the process was simple. I used my iPhone 6S that could do 240 frames per second video in a stationary point. And I basically loaded up a page, scrolled 4 or 5 times, repeated that test 3 or 4 times, measured it before the update and then after the update, and then you count the frames in between, and that's where you come up with the math that you see on that graph. And that's a significant difference. And I will say, having had the Surface Pro 4 and the Surface Book side by side with each other, the difference was noticeable. It wasn't just measurable, it was noticeable. Like I could tell a difference when one was updated and one wasn't. And you don't really get, when we talk about performance improvements, going from Haswell to Broadwell to Skylake, a lot of times we can't say that. Like, okay, if you're doing encoding tasks, it's gonna be faster, right? And a lot of times we don't get to say you will notice a difference. I think if you are using a mobile device with Skylake, that has a touchscreen interface and even a mouse input, you're still going to have the same thing, but it may feel a little bit less like kind of direct to you. You will be able to see and feel a difference with this when you do that upgrade. And all you have to do, and if you have a Skylake machine, it's already kind of built into it. It's already part of it. You just have to upgrade to the version of Windows that supports it now.
That's a good thing, not having to upgrade.
yeah, it is, and it's something that does apply to desktop users as well. Though the benefit to them is maybe less dramatic, right? Because it's okay for PCs that are desktops to be more, kind of less concerned about power delivery, right, and efficiency. But they still do that. Everything still throttles down to its base clock speed and then moves up. But, obviously the benefits for a mobile platform are much more obvious, right? You want it to be at that minimum for as long as possible. But when you interact with it, you want it to spike up. And if it's going to go all the way up to 3 gigahertz, you might as well get it up there faster so that it will come back down faster as well. So I came away more impressed with speed shift as a technology and the update for it than I really expected to. So it's to me, it's another
That's a good
reason.
thing. That's rare and unusual and good.
That's true. You're right. You are right. For me, it's like, well, okay, does this make me want to? So I have a Broadwell notebook now. Does it make me want to upgrade to a Skylake? I don't know if it would change my mind that dramatically to go one way or the other, but it does say, okay, if I'm buying a new laptop now and I can get a Skylake one and a Broadwell one for equivalent prices, $100 difference or something like that, then to me, that added benefit, especially for like a 2-in-1 device, is definitely a noteworthy feature to have in there. So I'm a little confused by, like, Microsoft didn't mention it at all. Like, it wasn't part of their update release notes. Intel didn't really talk about it at all. I just kind of had like a little note pass my way. It's like, hey, you might want to check build 10586 for some speed shift additions there. I was like, okay, all right, I'll take a look. And sure enough, I did, and it was neat and worked well, not just there. So it is a positive thing that, we don't get to see very often.
I know. I'm charmed watching you like, oh, this thing, it did what it was supposed to do, and it wasn't mostly hyperbole, and I noticed it, and that was kind of awesome and weird and unsettling, and why doesn't this happen more often?
Yeah, that's a good point. Why doesn't this happen more often is a very fair, valid concern. So,
oh my goodness. Intel launches Knights Landing-based Xeon Phi AIBs. That is add-in board version. if you need all the processing power, Scott Michaud's got a write-up for you. First of all, let me point out these are aimed at supercomputing audiences. This is going to be a socketed processor that is embedded in, as PC World states, I quote, a limited number of workstations, unquote, by the first half of next year. And it's kind of like half GPU architecture, half x86 instruction set. This is a 72-core, 512-bit processor. And Scott does a really good job of explaining why that's a lot faster than it sounds, right? Because, oh, GPUs have like 4,000 cores, but they're not actually. And that is, you know, it's really interesting. Like, so Knight's Landing, 512-bit registers that can hold 16 precision, 32-bit values and operate on them simultaneously. And then if you take 72 cores times 16 single precision values, you get 1152. You know, that we're in shader count territory. And he added on later on, quote, I just realized that while I kept saying one of the reasons I never elaborated on the other points, Knight's Landing also has 4 threads per core. So that 72 core is actually 288 thread with 512-bit registers that can perform 16 32-bit SIMD instructions simultaneously. While hyperthreading is not known to be 100% efficient, you could consider Knight's Landing to be a GPU with 4,608 shader units. Again, it's not the best way to count it, but it could sort of work. And one of the things he does is he explains how GPUs, you know, they tie a bunch of cores together and they sort of, they're tricksy. They're creative in how they do things. Sometimes more creative than others if you get into memory counting, but that's an issue we won't bring up again. Knight's Landing isn't available on Intel Arc yet, Scott notes. Previous models are in the $2,000 to $4,000 range. And, you know, this is not something you're buying for gaming. It is not a combined GPU, CPU. It is, however, something for people who are doing super badass calculations like, I need to run a weather simulation, you know?
Right.
This might be the slow version of the computer they use for that.
It's interesting because this is all I can't remember the name. Larrabee is the architecture that was originally, like when Intel talked about it, they talked about it being this was going to be a discrete add-in GPU, and that kind of just I don't want to say it failed miserably. They just totally shifted directions, right? They realized, okay, this isn't as easy as we thought it was going to be. And the issue is more on, like, clearly they have the capability to get compute power there. I don't know if they have the capability to get compute power at the price they need it to be at for a consumer. But it's really a software issue, right? Like, because dealing with 4,000 GPU shaders is very different than dealing with 4,000 actual CPU cores on a die like this. So the APIs is really the primary holdback for something like that. But still, from a raw compute standpoint, this is actually pretty impressive stuff. Yeah.
Whether or not you have the tools or the application or the operating system or access to any of those things, you create something that will take advantage of this giant sack of awesomeness is an entirely different, you know, question.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I left it at the front of the house. I apologize, but we got a link to it in the show notes. I've been playing around with Dell's Inspiron 15 7000 series non-touchscreen, and I was laughing because you know, we spent so much time talking about, like, oh, the Surface Pro 4, it's 2.5 pounds. You know, the new Yoga, it's 3 pounds. And thank you, my lovely wife, you know, to look at something like this new Dell, which is rocking 5 pounds of the mass, a 15.6-inch non-touch screen, non-touch screen, a 15-inch screen that does not touch, which I'm actually really enjoying because I so rarely use touchscreens. But in a 960M, you basically have 750 Ti performance inside of a device with about 10 hours of battery life. I'll be really curious because I think you have one of these in for testing, Ryan. If you do some battery testing on using the NVIDIA GPU versus, you know, using it in non-3D gaming environments, because the difference, I feel like you get about a quarter of the battery life as soon as you start, you know, firing up Fallout 4. But part of what's crazy about that is there's one screw to take off this cover, and you have access to everything inside of the case. So it comes with what they call a 1 terabyte hybrid hard drive, which is mostly a 1 terabyte standard hard drive. You've got an M.2 slot, which I think I can get to appear there. And they've got 8 gigabytes in one slot, and you can put a second 8 gigabyte stick in to bring it up to 16. And if you decide to yank the battery, that should be pretty manageable. It's a pretty massive 74 watt hour battery. They're claiming like 10 hours of battery life. And it's basically, I would say, I am very comfortable in saying it is pretty much, 750 Ti Core i5 desktop performance in a laptop with a full keyboard, which I still had to grab an external mouse as I sort of return to gaming and volume. But it's funny, the thing that I forgot to note on Tech Thing yesterday is like you get with a lot of, we're going to stuff a 144 key keypad into a laptop, is the keyboard is offset to the left, and then they centered the touchpad on the keyboard, which is offset from the center of the laptop, which you will either get over in the first few days of usage, or it will drive you completely insane pretty much forever. But it's $799, and it's the first gaming laptop I've looked at in a long time. And two, it's the first gaming laptop I've looked at in a long time where I wasn't like, oh yeah, because I got $3,000 for an inferior gaming machine. Why?
Right, it is budget minded.
Yeah. But it's funny. One of the things that my friend Darren from Hack5 has been looking for a replacement, and he got really excited about this because the storage potential between the standard 2.5-inch drive slot and the M.2 slot. But he's desperate for 32 gigabytes of RAM. But I kept thinking, like, wow, if you have to do video editing or Photoshop on the fly, this would be really tempting in terms of the amount of performance and storage you can get inside of there. It's a little more massive than a Surface Pro or a Yoga 900 or any of the other laptops we could name, XPS 13. But man, 16 gigabytes and a fast processor is a nice thing. You can get Core i7 processors. But yeah, a mere 16 gigabytes of memory capacity, not 32 gigabytes of memory. So it kind of made me laugh. But even with a Core i7, you're still looking, Core i7, 8 gigs and a 1 terabyte drive, you're still looking at $1,100. So, oh wait, I take that back. You can get a non-touch screen with the Core i7 processor, 8 gigs and 1 terabyte for $899 with the 960M graphics. Is it? Oh, it is. They all have 960M graphics. Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal.
That's tempting. I wouldn't want to try to fit it in my little tiny backpack, but right. But then again, I'm often amazed at how many pounds of mayhem I can stuff into my little tiny backpack. But that would be tempting for a CES editing machine. More details in the future. So we actually have a couple of stories coming up later on in the show that involve iFixit teardowns. I want to point that out because iFixit is oddly enough an advertiser on the show, and if you are morally offended by us covering their teardowns while doing an ad, I apologize in advance. But I want to say this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit. Man, you've seen us talk about them. You've seen me use the tools. I like the iFixit crew. It's really simple. They want to keep stuff out of landfills. They want you to be able to fix the things you own. They want you to be able to keep the things you have for as long as possible, if not longer than you expected. They got something new from iFixit, the Repair Business Toolkit. They want you to be able to kickstart a repair business, or basically it's an instant tech go bag. Just take it all to the next level. They pretty much take the entire iFixit tool catalog and put it in a custom shoulder bag. The ProTech Toolkit, 70 tools to help you dish, and I quote, sweet repair justice, which has everything from the stupid Apple pentalobe screws to Torx drivers to all sorts of useful things, and spudgers and anti-static tweezers, the magnetic project mat, which has really reduced my consumption of blue tape while taking things apart because the screws stick to the magnetic project mat instead of me having to put little rolls of blue tape and stick the screws to them. The portable anti-static mat, ProTech screwdriver set, which is essentially, rather than the sort of giant collection of bits inside of the iFixit toolkit, they are full-size kind of pro-grade screwdrivers that are kind of nice if you're having to do one job over and over again, like open up PCs or laptops. The eye opener, which is their suction cup. No, actually, that's their the heating pad, the device they use to help you unglue screens and unstick screens. The heavy duty suction cups for iMac screens and heavy displays. Do not, by the way, use the heavy duty suction cups on an iPhone screen. It will shatter that puppy. It is not designed for iPhone screens. It's designed for bigger, more honking screens. I got a digital multimeter in there, which is really an incredibly useful tool. Tons of spudgers and picks and other things, basically plastic tools to open up cases, a dust blower, screen clear, microfiber cloth, a brush, and it's all in this really slick bag, a messenger bag. So, you know, all your tools are in one place, whether or not you want to make sure they haven't been scattered all over the house or because you're taking your repair shop on the go. Literally, it's all the tools you need to repair all kinds of things in one place, in a giant bundle. It's $100 less than buying everything individually. They sell it for $249.95. Get it for yourself, for a new employee. Give it as a gift, because I understand some people are starting to buy for the holiday season already. And what's amazing about iFixit, if you've never been there, iFixit.com has guides and tutorials to help you put all those tools to use. Fix your friend's cracked iPad screen, swap the battery in your neighbor's iPhone, build or upgrade a laptop or PC, fix your toilet, eyeglasses, clock radios, trains. Children are an endless opportunity to repair things. And seriously, you should check out the tools that are available at iFixit.com, like the Repair Business Toolkit and the instructions. So many guides, so many tutorials, all at iFixit.com. Now, if you go to iFixit.com/twit, that's iFixit.com/twit, you can save $10 off any purchase of $50 or more by entering the code TWiCH at checkout. iFixit and use the code TWiCH TWiCH to save $10. And we want to thank iFixit for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. I have 3 of their ProTech toolkits at this point. One's with my wife, one's in the truck toolkit, and one's in my desk at the office. And the magnetic project mat is awesome. Anytime you can take all of the screws and turn them upside down and not have them fall off, sack of awesome.
That's pretty good.
Just saying. iFixit.com/twit, TWiCH at checkout. Save yourself some money. Go fix all the things. You know, if you fix things, you don't spend as much money on new things. I'm just putting it out there for you. It's a life changer, people.
It's deep thoughts.
Hey, man, I'm a guy when I'm not contemplating weeping because Skype is trying to kill me. Man, the Boltzmann initiative sounds like something starring Clint Eastwood and the Iger sanction. Like the Boltzmann initiative, I think of this as being the Clint Eastwood sequel to the Iger sanction, which is 70s camp at its finest. But it's actually AMD's answer to HPC, which is essentially AMD wants to compete against Intel and NVIDIA, and they've come up with a Boltzmann initiative to help fight that. So they want to bring together a new way to unite the clans, as writes Jeremy Hellstrom. Basically, heterogeneous compute compiler, the heterogeneous compute interface for portability, aka the HIP, for CUDA-based apps, which will convert CUDA code into C++, which is going to be useful for actually getting stuff that was originally intended for NVIDIA CUDA code to run on AMD APUs and FirePro GPUs. Headless Linux driver, HCSA runtime infrastructure interface for managing clusters. No cats, however, are included in this package. Digitimes has a big write-up on that, but they're also doing like peer-to-peer GPU support and a whole bunch of stuff. But AMD is continuing to figure out ways to make AMD relevant in portions of the market that are all about big honking margins from big honking institutions that need to do big honking computing. Is that an exaggeration on my part? Or
No, it is not. The most interesting part about this for me is I'm glad to see them go in this direction.
Right.
NVIDIA has been kind of dominating the high-performance compute, GPU compute side of this stuff. Right. Not necessarily because they have a huge technological advantage, like from the GPU core itself, although they do have some advantages, and AMD has some other ones. It's more, NVIDIA came out with a CUDA programming language years and years and years ago. And they pushed that to developers, and they pushed that into academia, and they did a very good job of kind of laying those inroads. and CUDA has become probably the strongest force in high-performance compute, even more than OpenCL or all those other kind of more general options. This is the first time with this, with the HIP, the heterogeneous compute interface for portability, that they are going to support a CUDA compiler for AMD GPUs. It's something we've kind of always said, hey, AMD, if you're serious about it, you should do this. AMD always kind of took the stance of like, well, developers will move from CUDA to OpenCL once they see the benefits of being able to support the entire ecosystem. That didn't really happen for the most part. And as such, AMD has kind of relented and said, okay, we're going to have this Boltzmann initiative. We're going to try to make everything compatible with our stuff. And it's honestly a huge kind of undertaking for them on the software side, right? They need to prove that, yeah, you can run, not only can you run CUDA applications on their hardware, but they run competitively performance per dollar or total performance or however they're going to angle it. So I think it's compelling because of, if only because of that, but it's interesting to see a whole bunch of other stuff combining HSA directions on APUs and GPUs and making them kind of all work together a little bit more intelligently.
We should probably also point out that AMD also is apparently working on a pair of GPUs in 2016, which I don't know if that sounds super awesome or super underwhelming when you first read that title. Scott wrote this up for PC Per, but Forbes had an editorial by Patrick Moorhead, who spoke with Roger Kaduri on AMD's future in the GPU industry. Patrick was a corporate vice president at AMD until 2011. They created More Insights and Strategy, which provides industry analysis. So a brief mention really caught Scott's attention, or cattail, halfway through. According to the editorial, Roger stated that AMD released 2 new GPUs in 2016, 2 brand new GPUs in 2016, which are hopefully going to be both 14 nanometer, 16 nanometer FinFET from Global Foundries or TSMC, and will help make advanced micro devices more power and die size competitive. Which makes me wonder if the R9 Nano is a dress rehearsal for everything that they want to put together in 2016. So could be Arctic Islands and the Pascal architecture at the high end. And as Scott notes in his, well, this is probably a little less than gentle for Scott. AMD's product stack has been relatively stale for a while, with most of the innovation occurring at the top end and pushing the previous top end down a bit. So Scott is pretty sure that this means they're going to actually do sort of a high-end architecture and a less expensive or low-end market architecture. I'm really curious. So interesting interview or editorial in Forbes. Very curious kind of editorial. Given who wrote it and who was the subject of it and where it showed up. But I don't know. Do you think AMD can pull out 2 functional architectures that actually make them more efficient, power efficient at this point? I mean, is that why they've kind of been moving very slowly this year? Have they actually been moving slowly? Am I just being mean?
No, I mean, they have been moving slowly, and this is something they kind of did, they've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years, where they revamped the high end, and they kind of let the low end wither. And they did that when they launched Hawaii, right? Hawaii did that, and you still had Tahiti and those other parts that existed. Then you got Fiji, and Hawaii is still there, but kind of maybe not really that much. And then you still have Tahiti parts and variants and iterations thereof. I would find it, I don't think you go into it saying we're going to develop 2 architectures. I think what you may see is a variant of the architecture where one is using a different memory subsystem than the other, right? Maybe HBM memory is going to continue to be too expensive to move into the mid-range and low-end parts for the next 2 years. So you make HBM the dominant change in the high end, and you go with, okay, we're going to go with some other variant of GDDR5 for those mid-range and lower-end parts. That may be what I see kind of the maximum variance that they could really get into. Otherwise, again, you're a company, you're smaller than NVIDIA, you have less resources than them, and if you're trying to balance 2 architectures, in my mind, one of them will always be suffering because of it. So we'll see. I think we'll know a lot more before the end of the year, just kind of like the company direction, at least, since they've been doing all those internal changes and that type of stuff. So I think we'll know more soon.
One would hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's complicated times at AMD.
It is.
The Nano's pretty cool, though. Asus Chromebit CS10 runs Google's Chrome OS anywhere for $85. Right about the time that Google's Chrome blog announced that Chrome was not being slurped up inside of the Android operating system, never to be seen again, and that was a misinterpretation of quotes involving the Chrome OS group and the Android group working to do more awesome stuff together. They announced the Chromebit CS10, which is essentially, you guessed it, kids, an HDMI stick running Chrome, available for $85. USB 2.0 port on one end, HDMI on the other, DC power input, 18 watt 1.5 amp AC power adapter, and then there's a little HDMI connector in the bag with that. Weighs under 3 ounces, like 2.6 ounces. As has been the Google way as of late, it is available in colors, including black, orange, and eventually blue, I am told.
Awesome
Tim
for a
wrote this
device
up.
that will likely be plugged in behind your television.
Yeah, I still, that was my thought with the Chromecast, is maybe they made them the lollipop colors so you could actually find it when you needed to upgrade it next time.
Okay, sure.
I think it's still unavailable at Amazon.com, or maybe it doesn't offer an Amazon Prime Video experience. It's considered acceptable and therefore will never be sold on Amazon.com.
Oh, no.
Hey, Amazon, why don't you go ahead and write that? Oh, wait, here we go. There's one offer of an Asus Compute Stick Chromebit CS10 Rock Chip 3288C 2 gig LP DDR3L 16 gigabyte eMMC Google Chrome OS device for $174, which actually makes it even more expensive than the Intel Compute Stick. So availability in these, like Newegg, I think is sold out. In theory, they're on sale in the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, Spain, Sweden, and Taiwan. And apparently, there's going to be a kiosk mode, single app kiosk mode for $24 per year from CDW if you still buy from a VAR/reseller. I don't think I've seen anybody do a review of one yet. Possibly because
I have not.
Nobody can get a hold of one yet. But oh wait, reviews are possible and generally state, for example, that while the Rock Chip ARM processor is no racehorse, it is good enough for basic web browsing, media streaming, and document editing, which would put it ahead of a lot of, say, Linux operating systems running on the early Raspberry Pis. So, which would be expected for an $85 device. So,
yes.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be curious to see where all of these, sub $100 semi-functional computers end up long term, because there's only so many home theater PC options one really needs.
Yeah.
I mean, are you running anything like that at home? Or
no? I have a Fire TV. I have a Fire TV that we use, but I also have an Xbox One. So most of the time, there was a UK game that wasn't on national broadcast. It was on SEC Network Plus, which is just something I don't subscribe to in our TV package. So I just fired up the ESPN app on the Xbox and watched it through that. But we use the Fire TV every once in a while to rent movies and that type of thing. Honestly, I should be doing more of that there. And we have several devices here. We have the Chromecast. We have the Chromecast Audio for those exact purposes. But for example, I know my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, she uses a Chromecast all the time, right? So she's babysitting kids during the day. She can put on kids' YouTube videos from her phone, cast them to there, and it works great. So, similar idea for what you get out of this, but you get a full kind of compute environment on this. You don't have to hook it up to a TV. You could hook it up to a monitor, right? You could hook this up to at a desk, right? And you have a Chrome OS PC kind of sitting in front of you if you want that, I guess.
You're not sounding particularly compelled.
I'm not. I've never been a huge fan of what Chrome OS does, but
right.
Yeah.
There are
I'm just a
worse
user
things
that
you could do.
requires local storage. That's just what I do. I save things, Patrick. I save them and then I use them and then I upload them.
Didn't you know it's just all no. You just need to use the cloud for everything.
No.
The cloud is the thing for everything. Yeah. Yeah. We mock the cloud, not because we don't rely on it professionally.
Correct.
But But there's moments where, yeah, I can't really take people serious. Why would you ever want to have anything that wasn't available on the internet? My tax records, for one. Sorry, I've been going down rat holes all day today, and I think I'm struggling into another one. Let's take a moment to thank our second sponsor of this week in computer hardware, Whole Home. Yeah, look, today's episode is brought to you by Whole Home. It's a teaching thermostat, a home energy gateway that displays your power usage in real time, monitors your appliances, and intelligently saves you money. There's one not too far from me right now. They tell you, Whole Home's like, look, think of it as an energy speedometer for your home. The energy screen shows your current electricity consumption and spend in dollars per hour, which gets really exciting if you fire up the oven, the stove, and the dryer all at the same time, and then maybe the projector just to really terrify yourself. They use a proprietary algorithm to constantly optimize your heating and cooling for savings and comfort. For an example, Whole Home says in Oklahoma, customers using Whole Home's price-responsive technology have saved on an average of $150 a year. It's essentially energy management for your home. And it's pretty cool. They just came out with the Home Load Smart Plug, which is really valuable. As somebody who spent a lot of their time running around with small devices and plugging other things into them, the smart plug lets you see your energy breakdown by individual appliances, plug your refrigerator, your home theater system. You can compare the last hour, the day, or the month. Whole Home's got a mobile app for Android and iOS, so you can control your system from any room or while you're away from home, which is, I think, kind of standard and kind of important if you want to compete in the thermostat environment, even the teaching thermostat and home energy gateway. It's really easy to install. Like if you can operate a screwdriver and poke a couple wires, you can probably get Whole Home running in minutes. It's 95% or compatible with 95% of all heat pumps and conventional heating and cooling systems. You can answer simple questions like what time do you get up on a typical day right on Home just to make it really easy to program it, right? So it knows when to start making things comfortable for you because we want to throttle the heating down in the evening so that you actually save money because your body's not going to notice it. Get a blanket, kids. It pairs to your Zigbee-enabled smart meter, and more utilities are using smart meters, so you don't need any special equipment installed on your house to figure out what your energy consumption is. Whole Home's just basically going to listen to what your Zigbee smart meter is spouting out to the universe. You will know more about your electricity use than your utility does. If you live in an area without a Zigbee-enabled smart meter, the Whole Home Plus delivers a meter data collector that attaches to the electricity meter and gathers energy consumption information. I've used those in the past. They work. Whole Home's powered by Energate. They are a big supplier of utility-grade interactive energy management solutions that are secure and reliable. Up until now, you could only buy this if you were a utility and rolling them out to your customers. Now you can get a pretty sophisticated tool for monitoring your energy consumption right in your home. Do yourself a favor. Save energy and money with Whole Home. Start seeing your energy use in real time today. It's fascinating. Believe me, it is pretty crazy when you start looking at it. Control your heating and cooling, plus monitor any appliance in your home. Go to wholehome.com/twit to get your code and receive an exclusive 30% limited time discount. That's HOLHOM.com/TWiT. And we want to thank Whole Home for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. It's pretty cool. It's really crazy when you start getting this kind of data about what's going on with your energy consumption, and slightly terrifying. Some appliances, it's time to replace, it turns out, or time to get solar panels, or just time to embrace spending lots of money on energy, which I
live in the dark, Patrick.
Yeah, I'll try it. You know what? Try that with the baby. Let me know how that works out.
And just sleep longer. Right? Isn't that what that works?
Do you believe yourself? You believe yourself?
No.
Are you sure? Have you been home since the baby was delivered? Oh, my goodness. We have rumors. Intel Broadwell-E lineup rumored to feature monster 10-core CPU, writes Ars Technica. Mark Welton over in the UK did the write-up on this one. It's starting to pop up everywhere. That's actually a Digital Trends article, which is also pretty good stuff. So basically, as is done, a roadmap was laid. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll start to see that. But supposedly, the new high-end Haswell eCPU will have up to 10 cores running 20 threads. The i7-6950X is pretty interesting. There's like 2 extra CPU cores over the Haswell-E. As with previous ridiculously, basically, once you get up to those 8 to 10 core parts, you usually end up dropping clock speed to take advantage of all those threads. I think this next generation one is going to run at like 3 gigahertz, have like a 3.5 gigahertz turbo clock, which is not going to be great for your single tasking things or double task, like things that will require 1 or 2 chords, like video games are not going to love this. If you are dealing with like 3D or video editing or stuff, it gets a lot more interesting. It's an interesting trade-off because in a lot of cases, by the time you have 8 or 10 cores stuffed inside of a part, you may have a significantly reduced, TDP per core inside of this. Like you basically want to make sure you've got all of the cooling you can throw at something like this. Because like less expensive parts are running at like, 4.5 gigahertz, even before overclocking. There's going to be a 6-core chip running a 3.6 gigahertz base clock. I think it's going to be really, really interesting because Ars Technica, for example, got a 6-core Haswell-E up to 4.5 gigahertz, which was a pretty big jump. Might help with DX12. Probably isn't going to help with most gaming. Might help with DX12 later. I don't think it's going to help anytime soon. But some good write-ups on Digital Trends and on Ars Technica. Q2 2016. So I suspect we might find out a bit more about this at a thing called the Computer Electronics Show.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, you'll be there. I know you'll be there. You're there every year, like furniture. I'm going to be there for 7 days this year.
I bet, I know, we talked about this before. I bet I have 10 meeting requests already, and I just don't want to. I tag the emails with CES 2016, and I move on with my life. It's like, you know what? That's not today. Someday soon, CES, you will dominate my life. Not
I'll
today.
let you know. I'm booking all the good meeting times now, so I'll let you know so you can jump in on my meetings. That way I'll learn something.
If I don't have any good meeting times, I just can't meet. It sucks,
You just want to walk the aisles, look at the shiny cell phone covers.
Exactly.
I thought this was interesting. The RT1900 AC wireless router sounds like every other wireless router you've heard of. A curious bundling of speeds assembled into a giant 4-digit number, except this one's from Synology, the NAS company. 802.11 AC Wi-Fi enabled router. And it looks like they've done some pretty good job on the software. Tim Friary wrote this up for PC Per. Multi-user MIMO beamforming up to 6 devices, 802.11 and 256 QAM wired gigabit Ethernet. The 5 gigahertz band tops out at 1300 megabits, while the 2.4 gigahertz N band, Tim writes, tops out at 600 megabits per second. Though note that a single device cannot use the combined 1900 bandwidth, and even then inter-device links are limited to gigabit speeds or less, which is not entirely unusual. I thought it was kind of crazy to see this coming from Synology of all places. And also really interesting because something we were talking about on TechThing the other day was just how miserable the support is for older routers. This is also tied into the FCC was doing kind of a request for comments and asking vendors how they were going to lock down their devices to maintain FCC compliance, and specifically called out DDWRT, which led to a giant foorah, rightfully so, on the internet. The sort of chief of technology at the FCC was like, no, we're not against open source routers. We just want to keep things FCC compliant, except that essentially to give the router, to give an open source operating system access to the current router chips essentially gives them access to things that can take it out of FCC compliance, which is de facto making these open source operating systems, which I think are critical to maintaining security on older routers, since router manufacturers can't be bothered to do so. I bring all of that up because Synology's done a pretty good job of maintaining their hardware. So the operating system is a Synology router manager. They've got a dual-core processor running at 1 gigahertz in there. I think 256 megabytes of DDR3. Synology says that it'll handle 70 connected devices with as many as 40 concurrently transmitting data. So they're obviously going for like a small business market or the Internet of Things, since apparently in just a year or two, I'll have several hundred devices communicating inside of my house between Zigbee, Z-Wave, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. Yeah, the whole idea of that's even more terrifying. Internet of Things, Internet security, Mm-mm. SDXC card slot, USB ports, so basically they've got file sharing. We'll assume their file sharing is not subject to some of the security issues we've seen with USB access on routers in the recent past. Basically they're doing a really nice Synology style GUI, parental controls, per device level quality of service settings, traffic managing, bandwidth monitoring per device, as well as total bandwidth used. I'm really curious. About $150, and it should be at CES 2016. So I will be attempting to see this at CES 2016. Hopefully you will be there too.
Speaking of routers, total tangent, not really total tangent. I got in a router for review. What is it? What is that, Ken? It's an ASRock gaming router. I think we talked about it a week or two ago. It was announced. It's the largest box for a router I've ever seen in my life. It looks like, I don't know what would fit in there, like a full laptop or something. Like it's huge. And I haven't taken it out of the box yet because I'm afraid. And also we just have too much other stuff sitting around and we don't need extra parts sitting there. But I feel like routers are the new power supply. Like the power supply of 2009 is the router of 2015, where everybody's starting to make them because people are starting to pay attention to them more. And hey, you know what? I actually want to spend more, and I don't want to get a cheap, crappy one. I want something that's high quality and has interesting new things on them. That's why power supplies developed the way they did. And I think we're seeing that with routers over the last year or so.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because we had David Murphy, who's writing for the Wirecutter, and did their the best Wi-Fi router for most people roundup, which is fantastic. 250 hours of research and testing, and they found out the $100 TP-Link Archer C7 router, which is on version 2, is pretty much better than most other routers. He tested it against a group of like 20 routers. Yeah, it's and they just did an update a few days ago. Quote, a number of new routers out now are coming soon, are on our list for testing. Linksys is WRT 1900 ACS, Amped Wireless is RT 1750, the TAP R3 with a touchscreen. The Asus version of the Google On Hub. Asus SBR AC 1750. And they're going to start looking at the crazy AC 5300 routers, which are the ones that look like they should be on somebody's head in Game of Thrones.
Yes.
The D-Link looks like something in the background of Battlestar. The D-Link 895 LR looks like something that came out of the background of Starbuck and the robots and the Cylons, Battlestar Galactica. Yeah. But it's funny because you walk in, you see things like, multi-MIMO ready routers for products that barely exist, and they've got like 92 antennas on them, and they're huge and they're really butch because I don't know, apparently that's the thing, is to make sure you have the router that looks most like a B2 bomber but with bright gaming friendly colors possible. I just love the fact that the Archer C7 was kicking the snot out of routers that cost twice as much. And TP-Link seems to be pretty responsive on developing firmware updates, which is pretty good. But I'm curious to see this next generation of routers. I also got to say, I went from like a 3-4 year old router to the Archer C7, and it made a huge improvement in performance. 802.11ac really does improve 802.11. Oops, sorry, cat removal. N is actually functional in my house for the first time. Beyond standing next to the router, and AC performance, if you have AC in your laptop, is pretty fantastic. I am all down with MIMO, and I really want to see multi-user MIMO in a big way. But it was amazing. It was probably the best $100 I've spent on anything involving my network since my first 8-port $100 switch 1,000 years ago. I was actually really pleasantly surprised at how well that router ran, which I shouldn't be surprised because Murphy knows his stuff, but it was good. It was good to see something run so well. You don't want to run out of money before you run out of life. That sounds silly, but it's pretty obvious, or it should be. People are living longer. Money needs to last longer. You probably wondered exactly how you should save money, how you should make your money grow. Trying to do it yourself, especially the right way, is complex. It's time-consuming, which is why we're going to tell you about Wealthfront. Traditional advisors charge huge fees, like 1% to 3% of what you got under management. Hidden fees for transactions and changes aren't unusual. Wealthfront makes it easy for anyone to access world-class long-term investment management. You can get started investing today at a minimum of $500. It's really simple. Sign up for an account at wealthfront.com. It goes right to work, monitoring your portfolios around the clock and taking action as soon as an opportunity arises. Investing for retirement, maybe you've got a long-term goal like saving for a house. Wealthfront automatically rebalances your portfolio and reinvests your dividends, all commission-free. And you laugh, but those little fees and those charges add up over time. Their software, basically, it's engineered to optimize your investments for the best risk-adjusted return, net of taxes and fees. Because if you make a lot of money and it gets wiped out in taxes, you didn't really make a lot of money. It's transparent. It's accessible. You can view all your accounts in one place. Personal, joint, retirement. You can see every trade that Wealthfront makes on your behalf in your dashboard, on your desktop, or with their mobile app. They can do sophisticated investment strategies like tax loss harvesting, direct indexing. The idea is that they're going to optimize your after-tax returns while simultaneously lowering your tax bill. And generally speaking, most people I know would like to pay less taxes. You pay 0.25% a year with Wealthfront. That's 25 basis points, zero commissions, no hidden fees. For a $30,000 account, you're talking about less than $5 a month. No additional charges for any of Wealthfront's services. They're managing over $2.6 billion in client assets, and it's grown over 20 times in the past 2 years. Join Wealthfront and start investing your money the right way today. Check it out, wealthfront.com/twitch, wealthfront.com/TWiCH to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. You'll see the customized allocation they recommend for your profile. And just for Twit listeners, if you sign up to invest, Wealthfront's going to manage your first $15,000 entirely free of charge for life.
For compliance purposes, I have to tell you that Wealthfront Incorporated is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are offered through Wealthfront Brokerage Corporation, member FINRA, and SIPC. This is not a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing in securities involves risks, and there is the possibility of losing money. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Please visit wealthfront.com to read their full disclosure.
Claim your offer today at wealthfront.com/twitch. You'll be helping to guarantee that you actually have a future that involves eating good food and not scrounging. And you'll be supporting Twitch in the process. Seriously, if you're not saving, especially if you're one of our younger listeners, start saving now. Trust me.
It's a good plan.
Start saving now. Oh, my goodness. At Jay Nooncaster, at Patrick Norton, something he said on Twitch made me ask, is there a Mini-ITX build in your future? I'm trying to find the right small case. Yeah, actually. There's a couple of builds in my future. And, of course, Amazon doesn't want to show me the case. The first thing I'm going to do is take my giant, crazy Skylake system out of the giant, crazy box with too many DVD drives inside of it, and I'm going to put it in a relatively small case. The Thermaltake Core V1 Mini-ITX Cube gaming computer case, which is not the most sophisticated or the most attractive Mini-ITX case out there, but is incredibly cheap, which I'm a big fan of, because I wanted something I could grab really, really fast and start playing around with, because I want to use a Mini-ITX case but keep the massive Corsair water cooler I've been using. But that looked like a fairly clean case design, and is fairly small, the Mini-ITX Cube. Lots of open space, as Ryan discovered recently in his torturing of R9 Nano Mini-ITX installations. More holes in the case equal better airflow.
It's weird how that works, right?
It's
crazy
holes
and things, and suddenly air moves through them. Yeah,
it sounds ridiculous, but it actually seems to work. This it's a pretty basic case. It's not going to be the easiest case to assemble because it's going to be reaching around. It doesn't fold forward like some of the nicer cases we've seen. But it was $39.99, and that price, that seemed to be about the right price for what I was looking for. So I wanted something super, super simple and super, super easy and super, super fast. It was also available on Prime. The other one that's been really interesting to look at, and NFC systems. Have you seen the S4 mini chassis? I probably first saw it with you.
S4 mini chassis?
Let me throw a link in there. This is a really interesting. This is like kind of the ultimate in super tiny cases. So they've done a couple designs in the past. I gotta get one ordered because they're not going to actually ship until December, like the last week of December. They're built, they're ready. They're just the designers kind of discovering the joy of getting things built and then getting them to people. It's a fair amount of money for a very tiny case, but that S4 mini chassis, it's $150. They'll do custom powder coating. The standard version is jet black anodized aluminum. The exterior panels have really, really thick aluminum, like 5 millimeters thick. Removable fan bracket. There's like a dual SSD bracket. And if you start clicking on the links under there, you start to see it's super simple, right? It's just everything you need to attach a few devices inside of there. And if you scroll down to the one that looks kind of green, you start to get a better kind of idea of what's going on inside of there. But if you want to, you can purchase a ribbon cable to run your GPU at a right angle to the motherboard. So the whole thing is super tiny. 330 by 215 by 63 millimeters, which basically means it's like a foot by 8 inches by 2 inches, give or take. My millimeter to inch translations are pretty loose. It'll fit a dual slot GPU if it's under 8 inches of length. Mini-ITX motherboard. Cooler heights have to be under 40 millimeters to fit inside the tiny case. But if you can keep this is like a ridiculously tight R9 Nano build, I think it's got a lot of potential. The only thing that you have to be careful about, it's designed for like DC to DC power supply units. So you can do like a Pico PSU if you can keep the wattage under 192 watts, or you can go for something a little burlier, which is an HD Plex Hi-Fi 250 DC to ATX adapter. So in case you've been wondering, like, how many watts can you put together outside of the case for one of those super tiny Mini-ITX designs, it's about 192 to 250 watts. The 192 watt adapter is basically a big power brick, and then comes a little adapter that shoves into the machine. But I thought that was really, I really want to build one just because I think it looks really cool. And I'm kind of curious whether or not I can keep the wattage down low enough. I'm trying to think of what's a 950 running on currently?
Like price wise?
No, the watts, power consumption.
What is that running at now? That's going to be like 70. No, it's going to be 120 watts. It looks like.
That could be tough to fit into a.
Yeah, that's the problem you get with the Mini-ITX chassis, right? Is kind of your TDPs and how much you can actually cool. I mean, that's if you look at that story that we did with the R9 Nano recently, where we looked at like 4 different cases with the R9 Nano. That's a 175 watt GPU. Right. So you will know kind of, okay, yes, this can support this and this won't. So the 950 is about 110. It says. So significantly less than R9 Nano. So anything that we can get an R9 Nano in, obviously you'll be able to get a GTX 950 in.
That's right. 750 Ti's. Wow, it's funny. 750 Ti, their NVIDIA says 60 watts of power.
Yeah, there you go.
750
that's
Ti,
the one that's no power connectors, anything like that. Yeah.
The 950 jumps up to 90 watts of power.
Right.
So it's not going to be the most badass gaming machine, but I could probably do okay on 1080p gaming. Yeah. But I don't know. It looks cool. I want to build one. So it happens.
It does look pretty neat.
I get sucked into cool design once in a while. So hopefully, Jay Newtoncaster, that answers your question. So yes, there is at least 1 and possibly 2 Mini-ITX builds in my future. We mentioned iFixit earlier in the show. They're one of our sponsors, but they tore apart the Fairphone 2. which is, I want to say it's being manufactured in Denmark, but it's a completely modular cell phone design. And you can basically see with one screwdriver, you can take the entire phone apart. It's with the idea that you'll be able to replace individual elements because they're being upgraded to something like a better camera, or because you are, you broke it, or there's a new standard out there. You know, it's a slower processor, you know, in the, you know, they had one mark against the Fairphone, which was that the front glass and the LCD are fused together, which, you know, is good for screen looks, but increases the cost of fixing it. Kyle Weed's got it for the CEO from iFixit got in touch with Andrew Cunningham, who wrote the article up at Ars Technica, to tell them that Fairphone compensated for the fused LCD display glass by committing to provide a public repair manual for its phone. And that iFixit has given the fused display issue less weight over time as the practice has become more common. It's mostly available in Europe. It's about $560, and it's really about repairability, not phone performance, because you can get a much better processor in a $500 phone. Not from HTC's 1A9, which Shannon reviewed on Tech Thing this week, which was a bit of a disappointment, but certainly a lot of the other flagship phones out there. The other thing iFixit tore apart this week was the Apple Pencil, which is enormously sophisticated and complicated and messy. And gets a 1 out of 10 because it is utterly and totally not repairable, which it was never intended to be repairable. I think.
Right. Not
but
surprised.
yeah. But if you like to watch things being taken apart by people that are very good at taking things apart, it's a really interesting thing to watch. The video is pretty impressive. Yeah, they basically ended up.
I see they had to have Dremel out, so
yeah. Yeah, once they got the Dremel out, they actually got to the giant chunk of metal and then this hinged folding pair of PCB boards that are pretty badass. It's a sophisticated, it's crazy how much is going on inside of the Pencil. Basically like, ST Microelectronics ultra low power 32-bit RISC ARM placed Cortex M3 MCU, 1, 2, 3 major chips, a Bluetooth Smart IC radio. I mean, it's the amount of stuff going inside of this is pretty crazy. I don't know. It'll be curious. Like the Pencil's still not commonly available. They shipped the Pros long before they started shipping the keyboards and the Pencils. But
did they do a Surface Pen teardown?
I don't know if they have.
I was curious if they what is the comparative teardown look like technologically?
That is a fine question, sir.
Yeah,
and I will search on that later on. Man, and NVIDIA re-releases the Shield tablet as K1, cuts the price to $199. The Shield tablet K1, pretty much they changed the name and they dropped $100 off the price, which probably they had to, despite the fact that it's got a badass processor and graphics. There's just a lot of competition out in the tablet market, especially for an 8-inch Android-powered tablet.
It did one thing I don't like is they took out the power adapter in the box. Yeah. We talked about this on our podcast last night. I remember Nintendo did this with a 3DS XL, I think, or the new 3DS, one of those, where they assumed, well, everybody who's buying this probably already has one, so why are we going to give you a second charger? You just use the one you already got. And I hate that argument, right? Because that is pretty awful. That I don't give my other device and charge it to somebody else or sell it or give it to my nephew or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, at least with this one, you probably have USB chargers around. With the Nintendos, it's like a very custom connector. So that wasn't as great an idea. But still, even with that, it was kind of, it's like $1. Come on, guys. It's $1.
It's $1.
It's probably $1.
Yeah, even if it's a couple dollars.
It's still a really good device. It really is still a good device. It doesn't have like super fantastic battery life. But if you are at all interested in kind of like Android gaming, it's still the best tablet you can buy. Still is.
There you have it. I just wish I just wish the the Android TV Shield box was more useful for watching television. You know, I think they should have put the remote in the box instead of the gaming controller.
I would agree with that sentiment. Yes.
Because, man, touchscreen games with a game controller are just weird. It's a nice controller. But,
it is.
Oh, my goodness. That's about it for this week in computer hardware. Anything you can tease coming up on PC Per?
Man, every time I do that, I like fall behind and have something else out. So like I think I promised a monitor review by this week, and I don't have that. I will have the review of the MG278Q, which is a FreeSync monitor from Asus, and probably will have a story up about the Predator X34, which is the 34-inch 3440 by 1440 G-Sync monitor as well. But I guess we should point out we probably won't have a show next week, since next Thursday's Thanksgiving.
I'll be here. Burke will be here. Where are you going to be?
Not here. I'm going to be honest with you. I probably would if I was allowed to be. But I'll probably be at some families or at my own house with tons of family there as well. So we'll see.
Well, that seems reasonable, taking off Thanksgiving, if you have to.
What do you got coming up?
If you change your mind. Well, actually, the Shannon reviewed the HTC One A9, which if you're thinking about buying, you should watch this review first, because there's some things about this flagship phone that aren't particularly flagship. Coming from HTC, I got to play around with the Dell's 7559, which I may have done a better review on this show than I did on Tech Thing. Don't tell anybody. We played around with Thermite yesterday and hard drive disposal. Dude, I forgot how much fun molten aluminum really is. And that'll be coming up next week. Got Peter Ma, who did the anti-snoozer at, and this is, Shannon and I are going to be doing the AT&T Hackathon, Developer Summit Hackathon, hosting that before CES this year, which is why I'm going out to CES so early. But we had last year's grand prize winner. And it was amazing what they hacked together with a fairly inexpensive 3D camera, netcam type camera, and an Intel Edison board, and developed something that will actually recognize facial gestures or blinking eyes and decide that you were falling asleep while driving your car and sound the alarm. He had some interesting stuff talking about rapid application development and why some of the lessons he learns at hackathons are valuable when developing real products. And many of the lessons, many of the things you pull off at hackathons are a very, very bad idea when you're engineering real world products. But
fair.
So it was a fun week on Tech Thing. So
cool.
All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.